My husband tried to trick me into getting pregnant because I did not want to have children. From as early as I can remember, I, Isabella, 26F, knew that motherhood wasn't a path I wanted to tread. Even as a child, when adults would playfully inquire about how many children I envisioned having, my unwavering response was always, none. At the time, I wasn't familiar with terms like child-free, but that was precisely the sentiment I harbored. As I matured, this conviction only deepened. The societal narrative often paints parenthood as the pinnacle of unconditional love, but I found myself questioning that narrative. Could I genuinely love a child in the profound way that's expected? What if I lacked that intrinsic maternal instinct? These uncertainties shaped my perspective throughout my formative years. Then, 2 years ago, I met Daniel, 34M. He was charismatic, understanding, and, in many ways, felt like the missing piece I'd been searching for. With him, I experienced romantic love for the first time, a feeling both exhilarating and grounding. However, despite the whirlwind of emotions and the deep connection we shared, my stance on parenthood remained unchanged. From the outset of our relationship, I was transparent with Daniel. Having children was not in my life plan. He listened, nodded, and reassured me that he felt similarly. Daniel confessed that he never had a particular fondness for children and was content with the idea of a future that didn't involve parenting. His words were a balm to my apprehensions, and I believed we were aligned in our visions for the future. 5 months ago, under a canopy of stars and whispered promises, Daniel proposed. With a heart full of hope and love, I said yes. We took the next step and moved in together, intertwining our lives more deeply. Our days were filled with shared dreams, from selecting the perfect shade of paint for our living room to leisurely planning our wedding without the pressure of a looming deadline. Everything felt harmonious, as if the universe had conspired to bring us to this juncture of bliss. However, life has a way of introducing unexpected variables. 2 months ago, Daniel's sister, Olivia, gave birth to a beautiful baby boy named Ethan. Daniel's transformation was almost instantaneous. He became enamored with his nephew, spending every available moment at Olivia's house. Daniel immersed himself in the world of diapers, lullabies, and baby giggles. He would cradle Ethan for hours, volunteer for diaper changes, and often be found napping with the infant nestled against his chest. Witnessing Daniel in this new role was heartwarming. I admired his dedication and the bond he was forming with Ethan. At the time, I perceived his involvement as an expression of familial love and support, a testament to his character. I didn't foresee the undercurrents that would soon surface. 3 weeks ago, on a crisp Sunday afternoon, we were invited to Olivia's home for lunch. The aroma of roasted vegetables filled the air as laughter echoed through the rooms. Daniel, ever the helpful brother, offered to mow Olivia's lawn, a gesture to ease her burdens as a new mother. As the afternoon sun cast golden hues across the yard, Olivia approached me with a weary smile and a simple request: could I watch Ethan for a few minutes while she attended to something upstairs? Her eyes, shadowed with fatigue, conveyed the silent struggles of new motherhood. Despite an internal hesitation, I found myself nodding, wanting to support her in any way I could. I anticipated that Olivia would place Ethan in his bassinet or perhaps hand me a baby monitor. Instead, she gently placed the tiny bundle directly into my arms. A surge of panic coursed through me. Ethan felt so delicate, so fragile, and I was acutely aware of my inexperience. I had never held a newborn before, and the responsibility felt immense. I stood motionless, cradling Ethan as Olivia ascended the stairs, leaving me alone with my swirling anxieties. For the first few minutes, Ethan remained serene, his tiny chest rising and falling in rhythmic breaths. I began to relax, allowing myself to marvel at the innocence nestled in my arms. But tranquility is often fleeting. Without warning, Ethan's face contorted, and he released a piercing wail. The cries escalated, each decibel amplifying my sense of helplessness. I tried gentle rocking, soft humming, even whispering soothing words, but nothing alleviated his distress. My heart raced, and tears pricked the corners of my eyes. The walls seemed to close in, the weight of the situation pressing heavily upon me. Desperation propelled me outside, where Daniel was meticulously tending to the lawn. The hum of the mower masked Ethan's cries until I called out, my voice tinged with urgency. Daniel looked up, surprise evident in his expression. He approached, and instead of immediately relieving me of the squalling infant, he did something unexpected. He pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of me holding Ethan. I was too overwhelmed to process this action. Daniel then began offering advice, his tone calm and encouraging. He suggested techniques to soothe Ethan, guiding my arms to adjust the baby's position. As he did so, he murmured with a soft smile, "You look so natural with him." His words, though perhaps meant as a compliment, felt like a weight added to my already burdened shoulders. My hands trembled, fear gripping me. I was terrified of dropping Ethan, of failing in this impromptu test of maternal aptitude. The culmination of stress and panic reached a tipping point, and I found myself issuing an ultimatum: "Daniel, please take him. Daniel, please take him, or I'm putting him down, right here." I tried to keep my voice steady, but it came out sharp, almost frantic. My arms ached, my eyes stung, and I felt like I was seconds from losing control. It wasn't a threat. I just didn't know what else to do. Daniel's face twisted in frustration. He muttered something under his breath, a name, maybe an insult, I honestly don't remember, and finally took Ethan from my arms. The moment the weight left my body, I turned and walked back into the house, grabbed my bag, and called a ride home without saying another word. He didn't come back until after midnight. I heard the door, the sound of the shower, and then the couch creaking under his weight. He didn't come into our room. He didn't say anything. The next morning, he was already gone when I woke up. No note, no message. Just silence. That night, around 3 a.m., he came home again. This time, I was waiting. I told him we needed to talk. "Tomorrow," he mumbled, dropping his keys on the table and heading straight to the couch. That tomorrow came the next evening. I walked through the door and found him sitting at the dining table, arms crossed, as if he were preparing for some kind of negotiation. He apologized, said he'd been overwhelmed, that seeing me with Ethan stirred something in him. That he didn't know what came over him when I panicked. That he just wanted to help. I didn't want to argue. I just needed the truth. "Daniel," I said, "do you want to have children now?" He looked up, lips parting slightly, eyes scanning mine. "I don't know," he said after a beat. "I love Ethan. I didn't expect to, but it's like this part of me switched on." "Switched on?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "We agreed from the beginning. No kids. You said you felt the same." "I know," he said quickly. "I know what I said. But people change, right?" His words didn't feel malicious. They felt confused, as if even he was trying to figure out what had shifted inside him. But confusion wasn't going to change how certain I was, how certain I had always been. I reminded him that it wasn't just about pregnancy or birth, though those fears were very real to me. My mother nearly died giving birth to me. The trauma of that, the emergency surgeries, the permanent damage, she told me those stories like they were scars I had inherited. They lived in me. They informed my decisions. But beyond that, I explained, again, that it was about the love. The unconditional, instinctive love people say a mother is supposed to feel. I'd never felt it. Not even a flicker. I was afraid I couldn't. And I wasn't willing to gamble a child's emotional well-being on the hope that I might. Daniel listened, but his answers began to twist the conversation. "But you didn't love me right away," he said. "That came with time. You learned to love me." "This isn't the same," I told him. "It could be," he said. "What if we adopt? You wouldn't have to go through pregnancy. You wouldn't have to worry about the medical stuff." He was pleading, but not aggressively. Desperately, almost like a child asking for a favor they knew they shouldn't. "We don't have to decide now," he added. "Let's just get married, settle in, and revisit the conversation in a year or two. Please don't shut it down completely." He was crying now, and he pulled me close. I froze for a moment, but I let him. I didn't know what else to do. I said nothing. Not because I agreed. Because I didn't want to escalate things. But inside, something in me cracked. From that point on, little things started changing. He began calling me Mama, in a joking way, at first. Then he changed his phone background to the photo of me holding Ethan, the one he took that day I panicked. I didn't even know until I saw it pop up when he set his phone down beside me on the couch. He laughed when I commented on it. "You looked so perfect," he said. "So maternal." That word made my stomach turn. I laughed it off, but he didn't laugh with me. He just looked at me, still, unreadable, like he was testing the waters. The final straw came when I pretended to be asleep one night and felt his hand gently rest on my stomach. It wasn't sexual. It wasn't rough. It was slow and careful, like he was trying to connect with something that wasn't there. I don't think he thought I noticed. The next morning, over coffee, he casually suggested I see a doctor about my cycle, said maybe we should figure out why it was irregular. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just a shift. This was a slow, silent campaign. I had told him, clearly, repeatedly, who I was, and he was quietly trying to reshape me into someone else. We lived in a country where abortion was still illegal. That added another layer of horror to the thought of an unplanned pregnancy. I'd never even seriously treated my fertility issues because I didn't see the point. My period was irregular but manageable, and I didn't want kids anyway. But now, suddenly, that choice felt like a vulnerability he could exploit. So, I lied. I told him my mother had slipped in the shower and broken her leg. That I needed to go take care of her for a few days. He believed me, or maybe he just didn't question it. He gave me a distracted kiss on the forehead as he left for work, said to give her his love. The moment he was out the door, I packed. I took only what mattered, documents, some clothes, jewelry from my late grandmother, and my dog. She was mine before I ever met Daniel. I didn't even leave a note. I got in a cab and left the city, the apartment, and that version of my life behind. I didn't cry until I was 3 hours away. The next few days were a blur. I stayed with my mother in my hometown, a quiet, slow-paced place miles away from the life I'd built with Daniel. I didn't tell her everything. I couldn't. Not yet. I told her Daniel and I were taking a break and that I just needed some time. She didn't press for more. She simply hugged me and said I could stay as long as I needed. That night, after she went to sleep, I sat alone in my childhood bedroom with the curtains drawn and the lights off. I scrolled through my photos, stopping on a picture of me and Daniel from a beach trip earlier that year. We looked so happy. In love. But now, looking at it, it felt like someone else's life. Someone I couldn't return to being. I booked a discreet appointment at a local clinic and got a blood test done to rule out any possibility of pregnancy. It came back negative, and I cried in the parking lot from sheer relief. Later that week, I opened up to my sisters. They were shocked but supportive. Both admitted they never really liked Daniel's intensity or how fast things moved between us. "We didn't want to push you away," one of them said. "You've always been independent, and we didn't want you to feel like we were trying to control you." They were right. If they had spoken up earlier, I probably would have just doubled down. I apologized for shutting them out, and we made an unspoken agreement: no more pretending things were fine when they weren't. Then came the conversation with my boss, a man I deeply respected and who had championed my work from day one. I gave him a sanitized version of events: family emergency, personal reflection, and needing to return home. He was furious, not at me, but at what I hadn't said. "I brought you out there with the promise you'd be supported," he told me. "I didn't know you were going through all this. If I had known, I would have had you on a plane months ago." He pulled some strings and found a potential role for me at the local branch back home. "It's not the same position," he warned, "but it's something. And it's yours, if you want it." I nearly cried again. And just like that, I started reclaiming my life. I spent time with old friends, caught up on missed birthdays and family dinners, and started sleeping through the night for the first time in weeks. Even my dog seemed more at ease. She stuck to my mom's side like a shadow and spent her afternoons dozing in the sunlight on the porch. But there was still one thing I couldn't shake: I wanted answers. I needed closure, not just for myself, but to make sure what I had experienced wasn't a fabrication of fear or paranoia. So, I made a plan to go back for my things and to confront Daniel in person. It had to be done on my terms. I borrowed my sister's car and made the 12-hour drive back. With breaks, it took closer to 14. I didn't go straight to the apartment. I went to my former boss's house. He lived nearby, and he had insisted I not go back alone. When I arrived, his wife made me breakfast and their teenage son offered to help me pack. I didn't expect that kindness. It made me feel less alone. That afternoon, we went to the apartment. Daniel wasn't home. I still had a key, so I let myself in. It was jarring, seeing everything exactly as I had left it. My coat still hung by the door. My slippers by the bed. It felt like I'd walked out for groceries and never come back. We packed quickly. I only took what mattered. Clothes, journals, my work materials, and a few houseplants I couldn't bear to leave behind. The rest, I didn't care about. I wasn't going to look back. Before leaving the city, I made one more stop, Daniel's sister, Olivia. There had been something gnawing at me since that afternoon when I held her baby. A suspicion I couldn't let go. Had Daniel planned that moment? Had he asked her to give me the baby, hoping it would change something in me? She was home when I knocked, and she welcomed me in with surprise. We sat awkwardly at her kitchen table before I finally asked, "Did Daniel tell you to make me hold Ethan?" She looked genuinely confused. What? No. Why would he do that? I told her what had happened that day, how she had asked me to watch Ethan, how she left him in my arms, and how I panicked. She listened, eyes wide. "He told me you had a panic attack because of past trauma," she said slowly. "He said holding Ethan triggered something in you, and you left because you couldn't handle it." My blood ran cold. "He told you that?" She nodded. "I thought it was weird. I said it didn't sound like you, but he insisted he knew you better than anyone. He said you asked to babysit, that you wanted to see how it felt to be with a baby." I felt sick. "And then he said you wanted to start taking Ethan to the park together. Like as a test run." I told him absolutely not, I wasn't going to let him borrow my child for that. She paused, then added, "He didn't talk to me for 3 days after that." I sat in stunned silence. She looked at me, suddenly alarmed. "Wait. That's not what happened." "No," I said. "Not even close." I explained everything, my hesitation, the fear, the way he pushed the baby into my chest and took that photo instead of helping me. Her face turned red. She was quiet for a long time. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I would never have handed Ethan to you if I'd known. I thought I was giving you a moment. I thought it was you who wanted it." I shook my head. "It's not your fault." She stared at the wall. "I think I need to take a step back from him. He's not okay." We hugged. She cried a little. And then she said something I'll never forget. "I don't think you were safe with him. I'm glad you left." After I left Olivia's house, I returned to my old boss's place to wait for Daniel to get off work. I had asked him to text me when he was on his way home, and surprisingly, he did, just a simple message, heading back. I was nauseous with nerves. My boss's wife made me chamomile tea and sat with me while I tried not to throw up from the anxiety. Her quiet presence helped me more than she knew. Her son came with us again, along with my boss, not because I wanted to intimidate Daniel, but because I genuinely didn't feel safe being alone with him. Daniel's apartment looked exactly as we'd left it that afternoon. My things were gone now, but it still carried the scent of our past life, the vanilla candles I used to burn, the brand of detergent we both liked. I stood in the living room, heart pounding, until I heard his keys in the door. He stepped inside, smiling when he saw me. "Hey," he said gently. "I missed you." Then he noticed my boss and his son sitting on the couch. "What's going on?" I didn't waste time. "I'm ending this," I said. "We're not getting married. We're not staying together." He blinked. "What are you talking about?" "I told you who I was from the beginning. I told you I didn't want children. And you said you were okay with that." "I was," he said, eyes wide. "But I didn't expect to love Ethan like this. It just changed something in me." "I understand that," I said. "But you tried to change me. You started calling me Mama. You put your hand on my stomach while I was sleeping. You wanted to stop using protection. You lied to your sister and manipulated a situation to force me into a role I never wanted." His voice cracked. "But I love you. You're my soulmate. If you leave me, I'll die. Please, I'll give up everything. I'll even get a vasectomy. Just don't go." It was dramatic. Over the top. Like something out of a soap opera. I took a deep breath. "This isn't a show," I said softly. "This is my life. And I'm not going to live it in fear of being tricked into a pregnancy, or pressured into motherhood." "What will people say? What will our families think?" he asked. I shrugged. "They'll get over it. My family didn't even know we were engaged." I already told them we broke up. Daniel stepped forward, reaching out to hug me, but my boss moved between us and gently put a hand on his shoulder. Let's just stay calm, he said. Isabella said what she came to say. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. You can't just leave. I'll find you. I'll make you love me again. There it was. The veiled threat. The part of him I had felt, just under the surface, 4 months. I stared him down. Good luck with that, I said. But seriously, stop pretending this is some telenovela. It's over. I placed the engagement ring on the counter. He stared at it, then picked it up and hurled it at the wall. It missed me by several feet. I hope, I said, that you find someone who wants what you want. And I hope you get help. And with that, I walked out of his apartment, out of that life. We returned to my boss's house. I spent the night there, wrapped in blankets on the guest bed. I didn't cry. I just felt still. The next morning, I drove home. I was quiet for most of the ride. My dog, sensing the shift, rested her head on my lap the whole way. I got back to my mom's house just before dinner. She had made soup. My sisters came by to check in. The normalcy of it all felt surreal. The next day, I helped my mom with her little shop. I swept the floors, stocked the shelves, made small talk with regular customers. That night, I finally slept, deeply and without dreams. I had a therapy session scheduled for the 13th. I was nervous but looking forward to it. I'd already told the therapist I wanted to talk about boundaries, fear, emotional manipulation, and how to start trusting myself again. Work had also sorted itself out. My boss had done as he promised and found me a role at the local office. I'd start in March. Technically, I had been fired when I left abruptly, but he rehired me under a different title. That's the kind of person he is. The morning after my session, I called the gynecologist I'd seen the week before. We had talked about a tubal ligation. She confirmed it was possible, but it would take time. There were still multiple steps, paperwork, psychological screenings, consultations. But I was willing to wait. She also mentioned a procedure called a bilateral salpingectomy, removing the fallopian tubes completely. It would take even longer to get approved, but I was ready to start the process. The weight that lifted from me after that call was indescribable. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like my future belonged to me. I haven't heard from Daniel since that last night. He hasn't reached out to Olivia either. She told me she's keeping her distance. She said she never realized how deep his delusions went. She also said she was sorry, again, for handing Ethan to me that day. I told her not to worry. She had no idea. Neither did I. It's been a few weeks since I left him. I've smiled more. Laughed more. I even visited my father's grave, something I'd avoided for years. I brought fresh flowers, sat in silence for a while, then told him everything. I wept like a child. Then I laughed. Then I wept again. It was healing in the strangest way. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day I'll fall in love again. Maybe I won't. What I do know is that I'll never compromise on the core of who I am just to make someone else comfortable. I won't ignore red flags or let someone romanticize my silence as acceptance. I may still be untangling the mess of it all, but for now, I'm okay. And I'm finally, fully free. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.